What's up everybody, I'm Matt.
And I'm Beth.
And today we're going to be reviewing the interior in the 2022 Hyundai Santa Cruz. So the Santa Cruz here is their brand new truck that they've come out with. They're technically not calling it a truck, it's like an activity vehicle, but it's a truck. It has an open bed. And, you know, I gotta say from the outside, it looks incredible. I mean, this thing stands out. It gets so many looks. It's kind of funny. This thing really stands out a lot.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of the Subaru Baja from a long time ago. My best friend's dad had that car, and as soon as this pulled into the driveway, I was like, wait, what? Is that a Baja? So it's very similar to that.
Yeah, and so I'm glad that Hyundai has the guts to do something like this, even if Subaru doesn't. And so yeah, this is a unibody truck, which means, you know, you're gonna have a smoother ride and stuff. I talk more about the driving, impressions, all that in my driving review, which I'll link above. But as far as the interior goes here in the Santa Cruz, so it is gonna be based on the Tucson. That's what you're seeing here, is basically a Tucson interior, although the back seat is a good bit different. But this vehicle is based on the Tucson. They built the Tucson from the ground up with the Santa Cruz in mind, so that's why you know, it has a lot of that same portability where they're able to swap parts back and forth. And I gotta say, for someone who wants one of these, you know, half truck, half SUV things, but actually wants a high-tech interior, this is your go-to thing here. Because I mean, stuff like the Honda Ridgeline has a very dated interior, and even the brand new Ford Maverick has way less tech in it than this does. So if you want something that makes a statement on the outside and on the inside, the Santa Cruz has you covered and has all the competitors beat as far as that goes. So anyway, but I mean, the first thing here at the interior, you know, you have these seats, and I love the orange stitching on it. I think it's a fun little touch. Otherwise, they're the same kind of seats you get in a Tucson, but they're soft, comfortable seats. They're perforated here, have all the usual power adjustments here on the driver's side.
And on the passenger side, we have manual controls, which I just feel like for the price, you could probably be expecting to have power controls. But I mean, that's just what you get for this car, and I wish that I could adjust the height. That's about it.
Yeah, and I mean, for trucks, a lot of times you don't get anything too fancy unless you go up to the full-size trucks, but this vehicle still, as tested, is $41,000. This is the top limited trim, and usually any vehicle you buy in the $40,000 range, you're expecting power seats, both for, you know, both front passengers.
Yeah,
so,
or even in the top trim of whatever vehicle you're purchasing.
Right, yeah, you would think that the top trim would give you everything, all those luxury features, and this does give you most of those luxury features, so it's just kind of strange that that one isn't included. Also, one important thing to note about these seats, though, is that they are heated and cooled, and the cooled is a distinguishing feature because I believe you might be able to get that in a top Ridgeline, but you cannot get cooled seats in the Maverick. So if you're someone who lives in a hot place and, you know, you're looking for one of these small trucks, just know that the Maverick's not going to help you out there. Versus this, you get those cooled seats, and it's great that they offer that. It's really nice here in the summertime, and they work really well. Next, though, is the steering wheel here in the Santa Cruz, which is the same exact wheel you get in a Tucson, and also I think pretty similar to what you get in like a Sonata and stuff like that. It's a cool wheel, though. I like how you have this kind of bar theme going across the middle of it here. It's a unique wheel for sure, but it just feels really good to use. It has a great 9-3 grip, nice 10-2 notches, just a few buttons and rocker switches here, very uncluttered. You also have these metal plated paddle shifters on the back of the wheel. They're plastic, but you know, I like how they're a little bit cool to the touch here with the metal surfacing on them. It's also a heated steering wheel too, which is really nice. That is something the Maverick and the Ridgeline do offer, but it's nice that you can get that here on these top versions of the Santa Cruz as well. The gauges here in the Santa Cruz are also one of the things that really set it apart over all of its competitors who don't have digital gauges. You have this 10.3-inch digital display, and this display is something that you get in both this limited and the SEL trim as well. So the top two trims both get this. So if you go for a lower trim, you'll have analog gauges, but here for these top ones, to get the digital is really nice.
And I will say, I never really mention anything or comment on the gauges at all, but I do think that it's set in really nicely, and it just like blends in with the dashboard, and I think it looks really cool.
Yeah, it's nicely integrated. You're right. I mean, the way it kind of flows into these air vents, and that's something a lot of these other digital clusters, even from Hyundai themselves, a lot of times they just look like tacked on. It's just like someone just stuck an iPad in front of you, and this is a little nicer with the way they blended it in. So yeah, that's a good point. I also like how you have this like cloth that kind of flows around, and it's this like circular curved theme to the whole dashboard and the way it kind of curves down into this. It's a very cool interior design. I love that they're being bold and daring and, you know, just being willing to go for something outside of the usual norm.
Yeah,
you know?
definitely different.
But anyway, the gauges are the same as any other digital gauges in any other Hyundai cluster I've covered in the past year or two here. So you have a few different looks here for the gauges. You have your basic trip information, safety info, all that kind of stuff in the middle there. You know, a decent amount of customization. It would be nice to see some type of map view or something else. They're fairly limited with their customization aside from the different themes for the gauges there. But I think it's still a nice cluster. And again, it's just nice they offer digital gauges at all, since again, none of the competitors do. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, you also only on this top limited trim get this 10.3-inch widescreen touchscreen display. And it's a bit unfortunate you don't get it on the lower trims as well, but the lower trims have a nice compromise where those actually have like little volume and tune rocker knobs, versus this has no knobs on it whatsoever. If you're someone who likes volume and tuning knobs, you know, you're going to be pretty upset about this center stack here. And it's also another thing worth noting is that this top screen does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it's wired. Strangely, every single Hyundai and Kia product, when you go for the smaller base screen, it's wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. Same thing here for the Santa Cruz. So anything other than a limited trim gets wireless smartphone integration, but then whenever you go up to the top one, you lose that, and you have to plug in your phone in order to have the smartphone integration. So really not a bad thing. If you're okay with a slightly smaller screen size, honestly, I'd probably recommend going down one trim and going for that SEL model instead, so you can have the wireless integration, because that's so nice to have. But this 10-inch screen is also really cool. I love how they have, you know, this blend of, you know, cool designs and the map there. And this is also the only screen to give you navigation, by the way. So if you want that, you got to go for this top trim as well. And, you know, all the other basic stuff it does very well. It's, you know, very easy to navigate everything with the radio, media controls, all that kind of stuff. But again, it's just you don't have the volume and tune knobs. So you're either, if you're the driver, you use, you know, the buttons on the steering wheel here. But if you're the passenger, you're forced to just hit an up or a down volume button constantly.
And the worst thing about that is that the volume buttons are right next to the driver. So weirdly enough, why would they do that if, you know, the passenger is wanting to change any settings? That would make way more sense for it to be in the middle or towards the passenger a little bit, since the driver does have the volume on their steering wheel.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, the buttons are always very responsive. For capacitive touch buttons, they're pretty good capacitive touch buttons, but it still is just more distracting, because every time I wanted to go and use those buttons to change the volume, I had to look down, because I had no clue where to put my finger, you know, without having to actually stare down and be like, okay, now I'm pressing it. And there's no haptic feedback or anything either, like you get in some nicer vehicles like Audis, where you can actually feel your button presses on those haptic buttons. There's none of that here either.
And there's also a slight tilt towards the driver, which is not bad. I can still do everything, but one thing that's kind of frustrating is that this whole entire thing being blended in and everything is piano black plastic. And I don't hate piano black plastic, but if you're constantly touching all of these buttons, any of these buttons, you get fingerprints, you'll get scratches, you'll get basically everything you probably don't want, and that's frustrating, I'm sure, to clean off, because then you're touching all these buttons. I mean, I don't know. I'm not crazy about it. Aesthetically, I know that it looks really nice, but at the same rate, the usability, I think it just makes it dirty. Yeah,
and it's also very reflective as well. I mean, it's just, there's a lot to it that it just, I don't think it's a good material for touch points. If you want to have it on the dashboard or somewhere else where you're never touching it, fine, but like, you know, yeah, I don't get it, but that's what you have to deal with here. Just make sure you have a little cloth to wipe it down if you hate smudges and stuff like that, because it's going to definitely irk you a little bit. But one cool thing with this climate control and all that area that is really cool, and this is something that they introduced with the Tucson as well that I love, is you have a diffuse button here. And so you'll see there's all these tiny little holes all throughout this dashboard where this vent runs continuously across. There's all these little holes, and so if you don't want air blasting you from just the normal 4 vents up front here, you can hit that diffuse button, and then we'll use those vents but also all these little holes to give you that airflow still. So it's really cool, and it's like one of those few things where like no one's reinvented air vents in the past 100 years, and Hyundai finally is like the first to be like, hey, maybe we can do air vents different. differently. And I just commend that kind of creativity and thinking outside the box that you don't get with a lot of other companies. And this is just another example of how I feel like Hyundai is kind of giving 110% with all their newest products, just with cool little stuff like that. And that's something you could easily miss whenever you're looking down at, you know, this whole center stack, but it's a really cool feature that's worth trying. I actually really like using it every once in a while, especially if I'm, you know, cooled off, but I'm like, all right, I want to keep it at this temperature, but I don't want to keep getting smacked in the face with air. Hit that and you have a little bit of a different experience, which is cool. Anyway, so that's all that, but moving on to the storage spaces here in the Santa Cruz. Up front here, it's pretty par for the course. I wouldn't say it's as good as the Ridgeline, for example, but it's not bad. So you have pockets in the doors with a little bottle holder, and then in the middle here, all you have is just this wireless phone charger here on these higher trims, and you know, just another little spot here next to it that's nicely rubberized. And it's a good size wireless charging pad too, so that's kind of nice to have, you know, for all your smartphone needs. There's also going to be two USB jacks in there, one for charging and one for plugging in for that CarPlay, as well as a regular power outlet in there. And so nice to have all those. You also have your two cup holders, of course, and then you have the center armrest, which does have a little bit of padding to it. It's fairly nice, and you open that up and you'll see a pretty deep cubby, and so, you know, no extra hookups or anything in there, but, you know, just a good size cubby.
And also right there, that is where you have all of your heating, cooling buttons, and they're actually buttons, so it's nice. And you also have your heated steering wheel button, but it is, once again, piano black plastic. If you put your hand here, because it's just
by the armrest.
Yeah, I mean, it's natural to like set your hand there. It's a little bit like, it's definitely gonna get dirty. It's already dirty now. There's lint on it, that kind of stuff. You know, I just don't think that it's great to put piano black plastic as buttons. I don't know. Sorry.
I do like that placement for the buttons though. As far as like, it's kind of cool if you're having your arm here to just be able to be like, you know, dink, I want my cooled seat, my heated steering wheel. That is kind of a cool thing instead of having it always. Everyone else just puts it right in the center stack here. I do like that they kind of thought outside of the box there, but again,
yeah,
yes, I wish it would have been something, either like these buttons down here are silvery. It'd be great to have that for those or something instead.
Definitely. I just think getting it dirty is like what triggers me the most. Right. But I do like the button placement here, for sure. It's definitely easier, especially for the passenger, so you don't have to reach up far.
Yeah. Moving on to the back seat here, though, in the Santa Cruz. So this is one area where it's definitely a smaller back seat. So this is where it kind of diverges from the Tucson, because they say they gave up 4.8 inches of rear legroom compared to the Tucson. Now, in practice, it's not 4.8 inches tighter, because I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself back there, I still had about 2, maybe 3 inches of legroom to spare. In a Tucson, I definitely had more space. Maybe it was closer to 5 or 6 inches, but I don't think it's 5 inches tighter, because if I was 5 inches tighter back there, I probably wouldn't fit, but I do fit with a couple inches of spare. So I don't think it's quite as bad as the spec sheet might suggest as far as rear seat legroom. It isn't super spacious back there, in my opinion, but it does work. So I don't think, you know, you should be scared off by that number. And I think it's a pretty comfortable back seat.
Yeah, I also sat back there with our baby, and I really didn't think that it was uncomfortable. I think I was fine, especially how I sit. I'm not always sitting straight up all the time, so I think that was fine. It's very comfortable. However, if you do have a baby seat in the back here and you're sitting as the passenger, you are going to have a very tight fit, especially a rear-facing car seat.
Yeah, with the rear-facing seat in place there, so it had enough clearance from this front seat. Again, me being 5'9", I could barely squeeze my fingertip in between the space between my knees and the dashboard. So if you're sloshing at all or anything, your knees are going to be in that, and that's hard plastic, by the way, so that's not a comfortable experience. So it works in a pinch if you have a baby, you know, in the, you know, rear-facing seat. But yeah, I would not say this is a great pick if you're a new parent and you need a lot of space back there. But yeah, you also see when you look forward, one thing that is really nice if you are a parent of slightly older children, you have rear air vents, which is always nice for anyone that's sitting in the back there. And you also see 2 USB jacks down there as well for charging for them. But it's interesting because aside from that, there's really there's no storage space in the back there, honestly. So you have little cup holders at the tops of the doors, but there's no pockets in the bottom of the doors. There's Also no fold down center armrest, even on this top limited trim. So those two little cup holders in the doors are the only cup holders you have. Again, no armrest or anything like that, which is something that usually other trucks do provide, and so that's kind of a little bit of a surprise you don't have that there. But if you don't need to actually carry any passengers back there, that rear seat does flip up, and then you'll see there's a bunch of bins and stuff underneath the rear seat there, so you can store a bunch of stuff that way if you'd like. You can also remove that bin. It's just, I think, 6 screws to pop that out super easily if you don't want those bins and you just want like a nice open floor underneath there. And then that does put it kind of more of an equal to like the Honda Ridgeline, which has a very similar feature where that has everything totally open underneath there as well. So that is your storage there if you want to have a little bit of extra storage space. But again, you're going to have to choose between that or passengers, unless you have something really small you can maybe slide underneath the seat. But but it is worth knowing that you can at least have that. So that is one thing. But I just kind of wish there was at least a couple more little cubbies or pockets or something back there. But there is one cool little feature with the truck bed. It does actually have a little trunk built into the truck bed. So whenever you open up the truck bed, there's this whole little thing. You lift up the part of the floor there in the truck bed, and you'll see a space that's fairly shallow. So you can fit a few like grocery bags in there, maybe a couple backpacks as long as they're not too stuffed, and that's basically it. It's really shallow, and I'm surprised they didn't go for more, because the Honda Ridgeline has a massive like double cooler size space that you can fit a ton of stuff in. It's a really cool setup, and this has just that very shallow thing. I mean, I appreciate it. There's also 2 little extra bins there and then the size of the truck bed. I mean, I appreciate that they did do a in bed trunk, because that's something the Maverick does not have. But, it's just not as good as the Ridgeline. So that's just one thing that's worth noting. The Ridgeline also has a larger truck bed too. So you'll have to keep that in mind, if you do actually want to use this as a truck. This bed, I believe, is about 52 inches long, just for reference, which is actually a couple inches shorter than the Maverick, surprisingly. And also, like I said, shorter than the Ridgeline. So a little less usable, and it does have the tonneau cover, so you can, seal it off a little bit better than some other trucks. But yeah, so that's about it as far as all of our thoughts on this interior. But like I said, overall, I just love that it's a high-tech option. With every other truck, they're like, oh, it's a truck. It's allowed to be basic and simple and, not as nice. I love that they actually were like, nope, let's give it all the tech, all the cool toys, and yet still have the truck thing. I think it's really going to sell a lot of these for people who do want that kind of best of both worlds scenario. But yeah, that's about all of our thoughts. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Take care.